and welcome to Round 7 coverage here at Grand Prix Portland. I'm Brian David Marshall, and I am joined by two-time Pro Tour Top 8 competitor Reed Duke, and we are watching Patrick Tierney versus Andrew Brown. Both players are at 5-0-1, and Patrick Tierney is playing a deck that he called Octodad. We see him play two Vessels of Nascency on the first two turns, while Andrew Brown, you know what he's playing. He's playing Bant Company.
Well, this is funny, actually. Andrew Brown, fresh off a Pro Tour Top 8 with Teamer Emerge. He said, no, thank you, not good enough. I'm going to switch to Bant Company.
Do you think to some extent it's like the idea of maybe playing 9 rounds of Standard at a GP, you want something that's a little less... Like the Emerge deck gets pretty complicated as a player, and the games can go kind of long and have very intense decision trees.
Oh, absolutely. I had a match against Owen and constructed an Emrakul Mirror, where at one point during the match, he just said to me, oh, I think I'm going to throw up. Like, the games are just crazy, you know, trying to manage the Emrakul turns and cut your opponent's outs and keep track of both players' graveyards. It's a mess.
So here you see Patrick Tierney's Vesseled into Vessel. So he's got 3 Vessels over the first 3 turns of the game, activated 1. You see a Noose Constrictor, a Jace, and a Stitchwing Scob, which have been put into the graveyard.
Yep, so I noticed he took a Llanowar Wastes off the first Vessel crack. The fact that he is playing all these Vessels could be either that he's looking for lands or that his goal is just to fill his graveyard as quickly as possible, or both.
Meanwhile, Andrew Brown has opened up with Duskwatch Recruiter and Jace Vryn's Prodigy on the other side of the table. And pretty happy that he has the time here to sort of let his board develop, give himself some more options with both the Duskwatch Recruiter and the Jace. There you get a look at Patrick Tierney.
So the key card in this matchup is going to be the Kozilek's Return. Patrick is really hoping to mill a Kozilek's Return or somehow put one in the graveyard. Noose Constrictor could be good for that, because when the Bant Company deck does its thing and floods the board with efficient value creatures, the real best way to catch up from that is just to flashback a Kozilek's Return.
So here we see a Traverse for Prized Amalgam. So that's going to get discarded to return a Stitchwing Scob, you think?
Yeah, that's seems like a reasonable prediction.
There you look at Prized Amalgam. So whenever a creature enters the battlefield, if it entered from your graveyard or you cast it from your graveyard, you get to return it from the graveyard to your battlefield tapped at the beginning of the next end step, and it's a 3/3. If you get multiples of those in your yard, it can be a really kind of just unrelenting threat that your opponent has to deal with turn after turn.
Yeah, so Patrick's going to be looking for a window where he can, as you mentioned, return the Stitchwing Scab and any number of prized amalgams that he can. Problem is finding that nice clean window, because the creatures do come back into play tapped. So if the Bant Company deck is able to attack the life total quickly enough, you can make it tough on the 4-color Emerge deck.
So here we see Andrew activating his Jace, discarded Tireless Tracker. Plays his 4th land, but it's an Evolving Wild, so no Collected Company this turn.
Yeah, no Collected Company. It seems likely that he's going to pass the turn with Spell Queller available, and he telegraphs that a bit by not activating the Duskwatch Recruiter before it transforms. The thing about Spell Queller is a lot of times you know your opponent has it, you just can't do anything about it.
All right, so another Vessel gets activated. There's a Haunted Dead. There's another Prized Amalgam.
Wow.
There's
so
a Kozilek's
everything
Return.
You wanted.
Wow. So now he can put that second Prized Amalgam in his hand, discard both of them to that Haunted Dead, and then put 9 points of power into play at the end of his opponent's turn.
Yeah, absolutely. And the good news is he has that option even if he chooses a different card off the Vessel. It ended up that he took Llanowar Wastes.
Okay.
And still he's going to be able to put a ton of creatures into play, lots of bodies for Emerge, and if he can find an Elder Deep Fiend for the following turn, this game is going to go the way he wants it to go.
Right, and here you see Andrew's like, okay, well, I can't just sit around on this Spell Queller all day. I'm going to flash it into play at the end of your turn, sacrifice my Evolving Wilds.
So Andrew is going to start to see the writing on the wall. He he, with his Bant Company deck, might be able to fight through all the prized amalgams, but he's got to be really worried about that Kozilek's return, too. He'll either be hoping that Patrick has not yet found an emerge creature, fairly reasonable because he's cracked a bunch of vessels and just, we haven't seen one. But even better, he would love to find a Selfless Spirit, be able to put that into play and protect himself from Kozilek's return. Though looking at his list, I'm not sure he has Selfless Spirit in the main deck.
It does not look like he does, no. So he has a couple of, it looks like Lambholt Pacifists, where a lot of people seem to have moved towards Selfless Spirits.
Okay.
All right, so Andrew attacks Patrick down to 9. He's holding Dramoka's command. Okay. Here it comes.
So here's the big move.
Yep.
Patrick has to be careful to activate this ability in the second main phase because otherwise the prized amalgams won't trigger.
All right, you can't do this at the end of your opponent's turn. You have to do it at the end of their second main phase.
Yeah, and it's a bit of semantics there because we're so used to saying, oh, end of turn, you're done, end of turn, I'll do this. But if you actually say the words end of turn, then you're not going to get the triggers that you need to get. Right. So
the bars come down and the alarms go off.
Yeah, exactly. This deck takes a little bit of practice in that regard.
So Stitchwing Scob enters the battlefield. And why Stitchwing Scob instead of Hunted Dead here, do you think?
Well, he must be thinking that with the prized amalgams, he has the ground pretty well sewn up, and he just wants to be able to threaten to trade that Stitchwing Scab against the Spell Queller, protecting himself both on the ground and in the air.
Still gets to untap with, I mean, a collected company-like explosion of power on the board.
Yeah, and that all comes at the price of his 2 weakest cards in hand.
All right, and he just swings in with everybody. Does this feel like there's an Elder Deep Fiend in his hand to you?
Yeah, it's certainly what he wants. Elder Deep Fiend, not only is it 5/6, but 2 virtually uncounterable triggers, Kozilek's return and tapping down the opponent's 4 permanents. Andrew's going to have to...
All right. Andrew's going to go for a Dramoka's command on the Stitchwing Scob. He's going to make one of his creatures fight.
So if Patrick has the Elder Deep Fiend, he can emerge here.
But he's not doing it when he really wants to do it, which is on Andrew's upkeep that way.
Exactly.
So Andrew's saying, look, if you're going to do that, let me force your hand and make you do it right now. Patrick says, maybe?
Now, he doesn't really have to jump the gun on the emerge because if he does wind up casting it and flashing back Kozilek's return, all his creatures are going to die anyway. There's not a ton of value of sacrificing a creature already on its way to the graveyard. But what has happened here is Andrew has managed to get 4 cards in his graveyard, so he can use the Jace and have it survive as a Planeswalker after the Kozilek's return. And I should clarify at this point, it's not even 100% that the Kozilek's return is part of Patrick's game plan. He might just be trying to fight fair and square with his creatures. Especially if he has 2 Elder Deep Fiends, to have the second as sort of a get-out-of-jail-free card, he might just say, okay, if you're going to slow down and play around my Wrath of God, I'm just going to beat you fair and square with these 3/3s.
All right, so here's upkeep. Patrick rearranges his mana, sort of indicating that he has something.
Mm-hmm.
And here comes Elder Deep Fiend. He sacrifices his prized amalgam. Says you can keep a plains untapped.
So Andrew probably going to float mana here, make Patrick decide about the Kozilek's return, and then have the option to Collected Company in his own upkeep once Patrick does or does not flashback the return.
Okay, so here's Collected Company from Andrew. Gets Lambhold Pacifist and Jace Vryn's Prodigy.
So that's good. The player's clarifying whether the Elder Deep Fiend has actually entered the battlefield before the Collected Company resolves.
Which means it's now too late. The Kozilek's trigger has passed, and he's decided not to use it.
Right, but there's even one more level, which is that after the Kozilek's return trigger has passed, Andrew could still respond to the spell or wait for the Elder Deep Fiend to be in play. And the card that would make that matter is if he hits Reflector Mage off Collecting Company.
Jace ticks up.
So I'm sure Andrew has about mixed emotions here because it seems like he's managed to put together a pretty good board state, but yeah, he's transforming Jace, so he's going to get he's going to have to Legend Rule there, but he's going to get a second activation of his Jace Telepath Unbound.
Okay. So he's making that Elder Deep Fiend very small.
But yeah, he must be thinking the fact that Patrick declined to use the Kozilek's return could be a hint that he has a second Emerge creature in hand, and he's just biding his time for an even more perfect moment.
Here comes Spell Queller. Again, Patrick's at 6 here.
And interesting that Patrick did not tap the Spell Queller with the Elder Deep Fiend.
Could have tapped it, left him just 2 lands untapped instead.
Yeah. And you would think that even tapping 3 lands might be enough incentive for Andrew to cast Collected Company in his own upkeep anyway.
Here comes Prized Amalgam. He says, I attack you. And Andrew falls to 8.
I actually wouldn't hate a block here by Andrew because that would force Patrick to either emerge, sacrificing his existing Deep Fiend, or emerge on his own main phase, which Andrew would prefer for obvious reasons.
All right. Starts tapping mana before Andrew's even in his upkeep. Discards a Prized Amalgam.
So it looks like he's going to return Haunted Dead and use that for emerge.
Yep. So 2 Prized Amalgam triggers on the stack. That'll happen at the end of the turn.
And this is a pretty cool play that he's doing. He has a trigger from Haunted Dead to put a Spirit into play, and he's going to sacrifice it in response, wipe the board with Kozilek's return, and then get the Spirit into play after.
Your parents have been posted.
So this time, Kozilek's return is going to happen.
A card that could complicate this exchange is Archangel Avacyn, if Andrew has it, but it looks like he does not.
Okay, so there's Elder Deep Fiend, and now we see Kozilek's return is going to deal 5
And that's the
damage.
big moment that Patrick has been planning for, wiping the board, leaving himself with 2 5/6 creatures.
Wow.
Prized Amalgam triggers, waiting to happen at the end of the turn. Spirit trigger, waiting to happen in the upkeep. And yeah, now Andrew is in a tough spot.
But Declaration in Stone takes out both Elder Deep Fiends.
Yeah, that's a big play.
Wow.
That's certainly step 1 in getting back into this. He's able to plus on the Spirit, but remember, he still has the Prized Amalgams to worry about.
So that's 7 damage. He gets to live another turn.
Okay, and there's a Lumbering Falls.
Oh, but there's a Lumbering
Yep.
Falls in there. Yeah. Wow. That was crazy, and you really get to see the power of that Elder Deep Fiend Emerge package.
Yeah, and also no surprise that Patrick has a draw so far in this tournament. Not because he's playing slow, but you could just see the depth and the subtlety that it takes to pilot a deck like that. Not only do you have all these crazy interactions, you're playing with your graveyard and your hand and your library all at the same time, but the timing on these things and stacking your triggers in the right order all takes a lot of precision.
Ye gods. What is going on here? 3 Fevered Visions in play for Jade Duong, a Storm Chaser Mage, a Thermo Alchemist, but he is facing down Emrakul, the Promised End.
Yeah, so a crazy game for very different reasons, but looks like we have a showdown between Blue-Red Burn and Blue-Black Control. And Ben has managed to get an Emrakul into play and is just trying to win the game before Fevered Visions and Flurry of Burn spells can take him out.
All right, in comes Emrakul.
So that's 13 trample. Jade has a 1/3 flying, which, if he plays enough spells, might be able to allow him to survive. Okay, remember Emrakul is flying.
Yeah, I was
so
just going to say he's pushing
Thermal
the...
Alchemist can't block, which I think, yeah, that's going to
okay,
be
he's
that's
like,
gonna
no,
be
I
enough.
can't do it. It also has protection from those instants in your hand.
Yep.
Wow, crazy. So Blue-Black Control for Ben Stark. Have you talked to Ben at all?
I walked by Ben, and he said, "Reed, you would like my deck." And I saw him draw his opening hand with a Mage Ring Network and a bunch of counter spells and stuff. So I was like, yeah, you know what? I do like your deck.
So despite it saying that you haven't been able to resist the lure of green, you are a blue mage at heart, Reed.
Yeah, at heart. I've struggled building blue decks in this format because the card drawing in blue is just almost not as good as the card drawing in other colors. Like Tireless Tracker is a more efficient way to ensure that you're not running out of gas than stuff like Dragonlord's Prerogative or Epiphany at the Drown Yard.
All the ponders and impulses are green now.
Yeah, exactly. Oath of Nissa even. Vessel of Nascency. So Andrew Brown came prepared to play against these decks, and in his sideboard he has Days Undoing, which is a card that I think we've mentioned so far in this broadcast. It's a way to erase your opponent's graveyard.
It seems especially good against this version of these decks, just because you go through so much effort to get all those zombies and all those haunted deads and scobs and everything into your yard.
Mm-hmm.
Even more so, I mean, I've seen people doing it mostly as an anti-Emrakul move, but it really seems to shine against this dredge strategy.
Yeah, it's even particularly good against Prized Amalgam because the Amalgam can't, it can be triggered at instant speed, but it will never come back till the end of the turn. So if Andrew suspects, okay, this is the turn that Patrick wants to return all his Prized Amalgams, boom, Days Undoing, try again later.
All right, the players are underway here already. Lumbering Falls and Evolving Wilds into Plains for Andrew Brown.
So I think the game plan is going to be largely the same in the post-board games, except that Patrick has a lot more to tiptoe around from Andrew's side of the board. There's a Summary Dismissal, there's some extra counter spells like Clash of Wills, and then, of course, the Days Undoing. So Patrick's still trying to do the same thing by assembling Kozilek's Return and an Emerge creature, but it's just going to be more difficult now.
He also doesn't have 3 Vessels of Nascency this game.
Yeah.
But he has
True.
Jace, which is pretty good. And in fact, he is holding a Vessel, so I'm curious what's going on here. Didn't want to play into the Spell Queller, and Andrew's just like, I'm just going to play Spell Queller and attack you. Here's Tireless Tireless Tracker. Plays another land.
Okay, so Andrew has developed his board a little bit. He's going to hope to untap with probably the Tireless Tracker and then start sitting back on his reactive cards, his counter spells, his instant speed threats.
So Grapple with the Past was the play there for Patrick. That's why he didn't want to put his Vessel into play.
Yeah, and I think maybe a small misstep from Patrick here. He could have activated the Jace first if he wanted to get a card deeper in his library, but now he's only going to get 1 loot out of the Jace instead of 2.
Oh, I see, because it's going to transform.
Yeah, the Grapple put the 4th card in his in his graveyard.
All right. So Duress sees a hand. Not a lot of action here for Andrew Brown. He's got one card stored on the table in the form of that clue, but 3 lands and a Jace.
But Patrick's not too broken up to be missing on this Duress. It means the coast is more or less clear for the cards that he wants to resolve. However, with what Andrew has on the board in his hand, the situation could be entirely different 2 turns from now. A couple clue cracks, a loot from Jace, and Andrew's hand could be 100% different. So we'll see if Patrick can capitalize on this window where he can do whatever he likes.
Discards a land here. Makes it okay. Oh, he has the Evolving Wilds. Plays Noose Constrictor.
Wow, that's a great card on this board.
Yeah.
It can block. It has reach, so it can block Spell Queller, and Patrick plus the Jace on Tireless Tracker. So even with a couple clue cracks, the Tireless Tracker is unlikely to be able to match up
But
well
Declaration in
against the
Stone
Tracker.
takes out the Noose Constrictor.
Yeah, so that was right off the top from Andrew. Remember, the Duress missed, but he found a card that's not backbreaking, but very helpful on this board state. Now he'll be able to attack Jace for a few points of damage, play his own Jace, and put the pressure on Patrick to do something sooner rather than later.
Plays land, gets his second clue. And he's going to crack one right now. Puts a counter on the tracker and attacks Jace.
Okay, so he elected to crack a clue and add a counter to his Tireless Tracker instead of playing Jace.
Yeah.
He must really value the ability to take Jace off of flashing back a card in Patrick's graveyard.
The big card that he could flash back would be Grapple. So
Yeah, or maybe getting two uses out of a new card in his hand, like a removal spell. But yeah, I guess Grapple is the main one.
So looks like Gather the Pack is the play here.
Okay, that's good. Still looking for Kozilek's returns, looking for, Haunted Dead. That can bring back Prized Amalgam.
So he's going to take an Elder Deep Fiend. Haunted Dead goes where it belongs, in the graveyard,
For now.
for now. Sunken Hollow. Ticks Jace up on the Spell Queller. And then passes the turn back to Andrew.
Main event match to the judges area.
And he has still not cast that Vessel, huh?
No, he's had that Vessel in his hand since probably turn 2.
Yep, so this turn he's representing the ability to either crack a clue or more likely bring back the Haunted Dead and the Prized Amalgam.
So 2 clues here for Andrew Brown with an Evolving Wilds, and thanks to the ability of the Tireless Tracker.
So this would be a nice turn for Days Undoing to make sure
Oh
the
my
Prized
gosh.
Amalgam doesn't come back and to refill Andrew's hand when he's running a little low on gas.
I'd given up all hope of seeing that card in action a long time ago.
Yeah, I think everyone tried it ad nauseum when it first came out in Magic Origins.
No, this is Bant, not Bant.
But yeah, so far not much success. But maybe with Emrakul and these Delirium decks, it's Days Undoing's time to shine.
Okay, so now we see a Spirit Token blocking
Yep.
the Tireless Tracker.
So that protects Jace.
Prized Amalgam comes back at the end of the turn. Andrew Brown plays his own Jace. So discarded a Deep Fiend and a Vessel there. Starts to sort through his second hand, the graveyard.
And the one noticeable card that's missing from Patrick's deck, Emrakul.
Oh, interesting. So he's just all in on this plan of putting the prized amalgams in play and then just tempoing you out with the deep fiends.
Mm-hmm.
In a deck he calls Octodad. So plays Traverse off of
Players
Jace.
in the Michael Thompson Charity Seal number 2.
Goes and gets
Your
prized
players are
amalgam.
going up by the red gathering point. That's the Michael Thompson
Oh, I
Charity
like this.
Seal
So
number 2.
he doesn't have any more Haunted Deads or Stitchwing Scabs in the graveyard, but he will soon when he emerges this Elder Deep Fiend. Sacrificing Haunted Dead, then bringing it back again along with another prized amalgam.
Sacks Clue. All right, sends a turn back to Andrew Brown.
And
Andrew-
now I see that Andrew has picked up a Spell Queller. He has to decide whether he wants to cast it at the end of the turn or save it for something else.
Yeah, he decides I just want to build up my board here before a Kozilek's return shows up.
Yeah, that makes sense. Ooh, Collected Company. So Patrick's deck is humming along, and he's doing a great job fighting a fair fight here. He hasn't found Kozilek's return yet, but getting into a fair fight against Bant Company is not usually a winning plan in Standard. And Andrew's deck is delivering. He found Collected Company here and might just be able to fight through all these prized amalgams and Elder Deep Fiends. We'll see.
All right. So cracked Clue for Andrew Brown.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what he does with Jace this turn. Okay, he goes ahead and loots. He doesn't want to transform it.
Now he passes the turn back to Patrick. Oh, he wants to see his graveyard. Interesting. Draw a Days Undoing?
I think he just wants to know what's coming at him.
Okay, here we go. Attack for 4 in the air. Elder Deep Fiend at the end of the turn. Tap your Tireless Tracker and 3 of your lands. So you're going to see a Collected Company in response.
Again, specifying whether or not the Elder Deep Fiend is in play.
Looks like Sylvan Advocate and Duskwatch Recruiter are the hits there for him. And now,
Now, the way Patrick is playing this seems to be representing that he's going to tap Andrew's board multiple turns in a row and just go for a win. So I'm curious to see if he attacks this turn, will Andrew chump block with one of these creatures to protect his life total?
well, let's see, because will he ever? Just puts both in the way, casually. Just splashes the red zone with his creatures.
Yep. Not worrying much about a hard cast Kozilek's return, in part because Patrick doesn't yet have any red mana.
Okay, here's Traverse the Ulvenwald. Another prized amalgam.
Yeah, it's his favorite move.
Hey, it makes it look good.
Yeah, absolutely. If you got to be discarding something, might as well find the perfect card to discard.
We believe he's holding another Elder Deep Fiend, right?
I believe so, yeah.
He's holding Elder Deep Fiend, 2 prized amalgams. Yeah.
So I like this main phase, bring back the Haunted Dead. Wow, 3 prized amalgams coming into play. All these creatures are tapped, so he's going to have to do something to protect himself this turn. Possibly, oh, what's going on here?
Did he do that at his end of turn so that they're going to return on Andrew's end of turn.
Aha.
1-7 is the starting point for Mike Thompson.
Since they're coming into play tapped, he figures why let Andrew bounce them with a reflector mage or do something else kind of untoward to them. And then I think he's going to flash in a Deep Fiend. And here comes Jace. Transforms to Telepath Unbound. And flashes back Declaration in Stone on the 1/1 flyer.
Okay, so Andrew wants to go for the win here. He said, I've had enough of this game. This match is taking too long. I want to get to game 3 in plenty of time to win. But I think he's going to get thwarted by Elder Deep Fiend tapping his attackers.
That's James Stevenson and Sean Hunter.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to see. Haunted Dead playing perfectly into the Elder Deep Fiend chain.
Yeah, and now Patrick is the one who's going to be threatening a lethal attack on the backswing. 19 damage from Prized Amalgam and Elder Deep Fiends.
Yeah, and that was great. He actually protected his Prized Amalgams from Declaration in Stone there.
Mm-hmm. My question is why would even do the Haunted Dead on your own main phase?
I don't know.
I mean, it worked out great because it baited Andrew into casting the Declaration in Stone on the Spirit token.
There's Sylvan Advocate. There's cracks 2 clues.
So now all Patrick will need to do is take out that Sylvan Advocate as a blocker, and he can win this game.
Easier said than done for his deck.
True.
Unless you draw Traverse. Yep, pumping the brakes here. He's like, wait a minute.
Why are you not dead? And
Usually
know
my
what?
opponent scoops here.
If Patrick doesn't win this turn, the game is going to get a lot more complicated for him because without more copies of Elder Deep Fiend, it's going to be really hard to get through all those blockers on the ground, the Sylvan Advocates. It's just going to be hard to force through damage if he can't win the game here.
So Vessel gets played. Takes a point of damage. Activates Vessel. And what do we see? Well, there's a Haunted Dead.
There's a Kozilek's return.
It's going to take the land. Now, what happens if he attacks with everybody here?
Well, one possibility is that Andrew will just block a Prized Amalgam and then threaten a lethal attack on the backswing, which would not work out very well for Patrick.
So Patrick leaves one Prized Amalgam back here.
Okay, so he must have another Elder Deep Fiend.
Nope, he has a Noose Constrictor.
Okay, so he's produced 2 blockers here, which can block Tireless Tracker and Lumbering Falls. It's still going to be lethal if he goes for it. The life totals aren't accurate there, but Patrick is at 12 after taking a pain, which means if the Sylvan Advocates and the 2 Spell Quellers get in, should be game over.
There's also a Lumbering Falls there on the table.
Right. So 6 attackers, even blocking the 2 biggest ones.
So he activates, or considers activating.
Yeah, and Andrew should be thinking not only about winning this game, but about winning it quickly to have enough time to finish the match.
Yeah, there's coming up on 10 minutes left in the round. They probably have a couple extra minutes in the feature match area.
Yeah. I don't fault him for taking his time against such a crazy deck. You never know what that one blue mana could mean after, all these graveyard shenanigans and everything.
He's like, does he have spontaneous mutation? I don't know. It's the only blue card single blue I can
he's got a
think of
Noose
there.
Constrictor. You can Madness just the wind.
Oh, wow. Sure. So there's Lumbering Falls animated. Here is everybody attacking. The Lumbering Falls has the bonus from the Sylvan Advocates.
Yeah, that's actually a 7/7.
So it looks like, yeah.
Wow,
Patrick's
what
like,
a game.
that was crazy.
That every turn it looked like one player was going to be dead, and then, they were just barely not dead.
Andrew's got to feel really good about that win. I mean, Patrick Tierney's deck did what it wanted to do there. Put tons of power. Really did look like the Collected Company deck in some ways, where just like these explosive draws where you're just dumping all this power on the board. But
Yeah.
the Collected Company deck was able to just sort of trudge ahead and play almost like an almost fair game.
Yeah. It played a fair game in as much as Collected Company is a fair Magic card. It's just really, really hard to beat Bant Company if you can't wipe their board. I think Andrew is just thinking anything but Kozilek's Return.
Yeah.
I'm happy to fight with creatures. I'm happy for you to tap my guys for a turn. Just please don't deal 5 damage to everything uncounterable.
In game 3, lots of cards you could see out of the sideboard here for Andrew. You could see Summary Dismissal show up. He's got his own Elder Deep Fiend, which is, kind of an interesting thing. I tap all your guys for some big alpha attack, and then I Elder Deep Fiend you before, you declare attackers.
Yeah, and I love this matchup because the players are taking such care to carefully map out their race. Okay, I'm going to tap these, exactly enough damage to kill in 2 turns, and then I love all of these little 1 and 2 of cards that can throw off the math and turn the race back in the other player's favor.
Yeah, we still have not seen a Day's Undoing happen yet, but that is
Nope.
also, if there's a great matchup for it, it's this one.
So both players pretty quickly keep, and you can see them, I think, increasing the pace of play. The round's not over or not incredibly close to over, but if the game goes the same way the first 2 did, then they are going to have to think about the clock.
So turn 2, Jace Vryn's Prodigy for Patrick Tierney. Hard to imagine a much better card for him, but it gets Declaration in Stone, so there's a clue for him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I don't think I want you to untap with that creature, please.
Yeah, I know that most of your cards are even better in your graveyard than in your hand, so...
Right, it's like drawing 2 cards with it sometimes.
Yep, absolutely. And I like conceptually casting Declaration in Stone sooner rather than later. I mean, in the long game when you have 8 lands in play, the clue is basically just drawing a card. But if you're taking off turn 3 to use your clue, then Andrew's probably fine with that.
So here's Grapple with the Pass. He's going to take the Jace.
Oh, actually reconsidering, thinking maybe I'd rather have that in my graveyard for Delirium.
His only other option would be the Evolving Wilds, right?
The Evolving Wilds was actually previously in the graveyard, so the option was either take Jace or take nothing, but he had to think about that. It is good to think about those subtle decisions in a deck as complex as this.
So now he gets to untap and to gather the pack. Puts Jace and Prized Amalgam in hand, and most importantly, puts Kozilek's Return in the graveyard, Reed.
Yeah, so that being in the graveyard this early is going to really change the dynamic of the game.
And now here is Jace Vryn's Prodigy. We've got a Jace off.
Yep.
Oh, wow. The Reflector Mage says, I know who wins the Jace off.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the Human Wizard, who's wreaked such havoc on Standard for the last 2 years.
Yeah, there's a brief moment when the fetch lands of Khans of Tarkir rotated out that we thought maybe, okay, Jace, had his time, it's not so good anymore. But now everything's about the graveyard again, and everything's about creatures that cost 3 and less mana again. So, and everything's about madness. So Jace is, I think, going to be around for as long as it's legal and standard. Here's a Traverse, I think without Delirium, instant sorcery and land.
Yep.
Might actually see Basic Mountain for the first time in the match because
Wow.
I saw Patrick with a Kozilek's Return in hand, and it could at least kill the Jace.
Yeah, decides instead to go for a swamp.
Yep.
To the red side of the stage.
But definitely thought about that mount.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess currently not having a way to activate a Haunted Dead if he can get one in his yard.
Yeah, his deck is certainly a lot more centered on black than on red.
Oh, by the way, he got a Haunted Dead into his yard by discarding to hand size.
Yeah? Does that mean he intentionally skipped a land drop there?
He may have, yeah.
Wow. Seen every angle. Patrick.
Oh, wait, we got a little bit of a disagreement here.
Oh,
because
this could
Andrew-
be big, actually.
Andrew wants to sacrifice that Evolving Ones, but he's like, I went to discard. I've discarded a card already.
Yep. So the rule is if Patrick says go to discard and Andrew doesn't stop him, too late, the turn's over. You cannot sacrifice that Evolving Wilds. We don't know exactly what was said between the players, but that is a really important interaction and could cost Andrew quite a lot if he, looks
Yeah.
like he's forced to untap with it.
We talked about those words have a lot of power. End step, go to discard. They mean very specific things when you're in a tournament. Wow. So Jace activates here. Andrew looks a little upset with himself about that. Plays his 4th land, attacks with the Reflector Mage, and just says go. There's a prized amalgam in hand for Patrick. He's going to replay his Jace here. And then plays a swamp. He can now return the Haunted Dead, discarded 2 prized amalgams, and again go from 0 power on the board to 9 at the end of Andrew's second main phase. So Collected Company hits Lambholt Pacifist and Duskwatch Recruiter. And Evolving Wilds finally cracks and goes and gets a Plains.
Yeah. He probably should have done that before casting the company, but I don't fault him for trying to play a little quickly here.
And new pairings for round 3 are now going up. Again, Innistrad, old and new, round 3 pairings are now going up.
Jace should get to flip here, which would mean he could also get another Collected Company out of that if he wants that.
Yeah, that might be great. He really has to worry about the Kozilek's Return and do anything he can to protect himself from that. But if he doesn't have any way to protect himself from it, then at least putting the fastest clock on possible will give him the best chance to win the game. Ooh, so he does have a way. He has a Summary Dismissal in his hand.
Oh, wow.
So Summary Dismissal has a pretty interesting interaction with Kozilek's Return, which is that the Kozilek's Return triggers while in the graveyard. You can cast Summary Dismissal to counter the trigger, but the Kozilek's Return will remain in the graveyard. So if Patrick has multiple Eldrazi to cast, all Andrew Brown can buy himself is a 1-turn reprieve from that Kozilek's Return. We'll see exactly how it winds up playing out.
In the meantime, Reflector Mage and Duskwatch Recruiter attack. Lambholt Pacifist sits back and watches. Get off the fence, Lambholt Pacifist. Okay, end of turn. Discard 2 prized amalgams.
Or perhaps during your second main phase.
Yes, oh yeah, during your second main phase. I apologize.
I get the impression that Patrick is a player that knows his deck really well. He seems to have all these play patterns like traversing for more copies of prized amalgam, doing things at the right phase of the turn.
Okay, so he goes to 9.
It's probably the only way to actually make it this far with such a complicated deck is to have a lot of reps.
Lambholt Pacifist does get off the fence, by the way,
Yep, now 4/4.
as does the the Duskwatch Recruiter, Krallenhorde. All right, activate Jace.
Magic players, there's time around. Time
Discard a card. Sounds like time's been called on the floor. These guys have a little bit of extra time in the feature match area.
schedules please find open matches and help them finish quickly.
You also see why both of these players might have a draw. This is,
Yeah.
these are some complicated mid to late game decks.
And they really don't want another draw. In these Grand Prix tournaments, if you're trying to go for top 8, you really need to get 13 wins under your belt. And whether those other rounds wind up as losses or draws, if you don't get to the 13 wins, you're not going to make top 8.
So these guys have about 4 minutes above the clock. I can tell you the clock is 1 minute past time. So they probably have about 3.5 minutes left before they go to the 5 extra turns.
My prediction is that if Andrew's going to win this game, he will probably be able to do it in time. The same might not be true of Patrick, because flashing back Kozilek's return might signal the beginning of the end for Andrew, but it won't actually reduce his life total to 0.
Well, here comes an Elder Deep Fiend with a flashback traverse the overwall. We know that Andrew's holding summary dismissal, which is going to be just kind of backbreaking here, right?
Yeah, so summary dismissal can counter the spell of Elder Deep Fiend, and it can counter both triggers that it produces, which is tapping Andrew's permanence and flashing back Kozilek's return. Remember, the Kozilek's return won't be exiled, so there will
Right.
be a second chance at it, but that's definitely the best card that Andrew can have in this situation.
All right, passes the turn to Andrew.
And here you see the power of Elder Deep Fiend being an instant, forcing Andrew to let his mana go to waste rather than leave any window for Patrick to resolve the spell he needs to resolve.
Magic players, if you signed up for booster
He says,
draft
sure.
number 55, please report to the Blue Gallery Point. Booster draft number 55.
Ooh, he drew your favorite card, Brian, Days Undoing.
I don't know if you want to give up on any turns at this point in the tournament.
Boy, it would be really funny if Andrew had a 7th land. He could go Days Undoing, perhaps force Patrick to respond with his Elder Deep Fiend, and then counter everything, including his own Days Undoing if he wanted.
There you get Days Undoing. This is a card people have been talking about largely because of its ability to interact with players' graveyards. There's not a lot of great ways. There's no Tormod scripts here.
Yep. So this is
Insane.
one way to actually get rid of the Kozilek's return in the graveyard.
Okay, so here we go. Elder Deep Fiend, sacrificing Haunted Dead. Trigger from Kozilek's return. And I'm going to target these lands.
And I think, yeah, Andrew is going to pull
Wow.
the trigger on Summary Dismissal.
Summary
Really
Dismissal.
pulls the rug out from under Patrick. He had been setting up that big turn for a long time, and Summary Dismissal just put him back to square one.
Counters everything on the stack. And there you get a look at exile all spells and counter all abilities.
Yep, so that includes the cast trigger of tapping permanence. It includes
Patrick can actually. Well, he's just coming in. He said, "What are you going to do? Block my Haunted Dead?" That seems terrible.
And is there any way to find out if time has been called in this match?
So they'll put a die down there once we go to extra turns.
Okay. So Sylvan Advocate gobbles up prized amalgam, at least temporarily.
This is turn 0. Reed.
Okay. Wow, grapple from the past, a huge draw from Patrick there. Here comes Kozlek's return.
Wow.
Down goes Andrew's board. And you see Patrick actually main phasing it there. He is willing to give up on the ability to tap Andrew's lands in exchange to just make sure his spell resolves. Make sure Kozlek's return wipes the board. And here's a flashback on Declaration in Stone. And the way this is winding up, it's going to be tougher. Wow, Days Undoing.
So Days Undoing strands all those prized amalgams and the Haunted Dead in Patrick's yard.
Yeah, I was about to say it's shaping up that neither player is going to be able to win, but now with Days Undoing, literally anything can happen.
Wow.
So that's going to be the end of the first extra turn, meaning both players are going to get 2 more.
Yep, 2 and 4 are going to go to Patrick. 3 and 5 will go to Andrew. He'll get the last turn if it exists.
Mm-hmm.
If neither player has completed won the match at that point, this would be their second draw each.
So Patrick wants to see Noose Constrictor, 4 prized amalgams, and a Haunted Dead, something like that. And Andrew wants to see an 8th land and 2 collected companies. And this is how the players are going to be able to put enough power and toughness into play to win the game.
Looks like at least some of your wish list is fulfilled on that hand.
Okay.
There's a Haunted Dead. This is turn 2. There's only one more turn for Patrick after this. Do you have a Languish?
Yeah, he did board in Languish against Andrew. Not going to help him win the match in time.
No, now at this point, I think he's just thinking about how do I not lose this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is Andrew's second to last turn. He does find a collected company. That's the card you were talking about.
Yeah, especially if he has multiple flash threats, he can maybe navigate around the Languish. And actually, Patrick only has 1 black mana right now. Boy, what a match. I mean, going to time, I don't feel that these players played slow.
No,
and the games
absolutely
didn't
not.
even go that many turns, but it's just the complexity of every single step of every single turn being important, every card going to the graveyard, every card going to the player's hands. Just a really cool match.
And having the choice of almost every card in your deck sometimes with the Traverse the Ulvenwald, digging 6 cards deep and then having to choose cards with collected company.
Absolutely. I would have loved to see this come to its natural conclusion.
Well, here's an Elder Deep Fiend sacrificing the Haunted Dead.
So
and Andrew's going to respond with collected company.
Yeah, end of turn, Patrick tried to play the Elder Deep Fiend, or played the Elder Deep Fiend, and Andrew spent the mana on collected company. Oh, actually, it was a
that was mid
attack
combat.
step. Yeah.
Yeah.
So even better for Patrick, and the company did not hit very well for Andrew. Just a measly 2/2 creature. Even still, Patrick won't be able to amass the 15 points of power needed to win in time since he only has one more attack step in this game.
Yeah, he gets one more attack step. He's got to get through 2 lamb hole pass fists and a Death Watch critter, and just doesn't even have anything remotely approaching the power to do so. Cast Gather the Pack here. Only finds a prized amalgam. So, you know, he's not in a bad spot if this game was going to go on. He's got 2 prized amalgams. He's got a Haunted Dead in his yard to return.
Yeah, after the Days Undoing, to me, it's unclear who would win this game if it continued. I agree that Patrick is definitely not in a bad spot, but he's also pretty far from being able to deal lethal damage.
Grapples into a land. Plays the land.
Yeah, he can languish here and ensure that Andrew won't be able to win.
Wow, what a crazy game.
Yeah, what a crazy match.
All right, here's the Languish. He's going to kill his flyer. Wipe out Andrew's board. Can attack for 1 with the Deep Fiend, doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And this is turn 5. Can Andrew possibly win this game? Don't see how.
Yeah.
Reflector Mage bounces Deep Fiend. Tireless Tracker. Days Undoing. I'm going to end the last turn. And that is a draw for Andrew Brown and Patrick Tierney. We saw 2 Days Undoings cast that game there.
Yeah. So I'm sure neither player is thrilled with the result. They both played hard, and neither one got a win out of it. But that's the nature of this format. And, I mean, they just played 3 long, slugfests, basically, and neither one could deal lethal in the third game.
Neither one could emerge the victor. All right, that's it for Reed and I here in round 7. We got some more magic coming up right away, though. Don't go anywhere.